Breaking news. Results are here. Abraham Lincoln has been elected as the President of the Union. After one of the most interesting campaigns to date, the Republican Party has won over all other candidates. To recap, there are 4 major candidates playing in this year's election. John Bell of the Constitutional Union Party, Stephen Douglas of the Northern Democrats, Lincoln, of course, and John C. Breckinridge of the True Democratic Party, which is from the South. Lincoln was excluded from the ballots in several southern states, but despite this, a Republican takeover was still able to occur. Lincoln won with 180 electoral votes, with Breckinridge in second place with 72. At the end of the race, Bell had 39 votes and Douglas had 12. Lincoln's anti-slavery platform is seen as a direct assault on our Southern traditions and economic stability. The fact remains that the South runs on slavery, and Lincoln does not understand that fact. So, dear Virginians, consider this day a lesson in camaraderie. Had the Democratic Party not been so divided, Breckinridge may have won. Nevertheless, Lincoln has won, and the South must now come to a decision. We may suffer under the rule of a Northern ruler who has never known the life and experience of a Southern man, or we may secede. More on secession from my colleague Eliana.
Breaking news. Our prosperous state of Virginia has just seceded from the Union and joined the Noble Confederacy. On this date, in April of 1861, Virginia has seceded with other Southern states. A well-informed citizen should know that after South Carolina seceded on July 20th of last year, Southern states have slowly been seceding. Our state has the right to secede in my eyes, especially since we joined this union voluntarily, so we should be able to leave voluntarily, especially in this union run by anti-slavery Republicans. Sasquatch Lincoln has no right to keep us in this unfair and traitorous union. We are joined by Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, our faithful God-fearing allies. Our new Confederate president is the Honorable Jefferson Davis, elected for an 8-year term, a veteran of the Mexican-American War, and a former senator of Mississippi, a true hero. All the states have almost complete sovereignty over themselves, including us, though those darned Unionists have tried to take away our land and military property. This may lead to more battles. Oh, more breaking news. Another battle has broken out. Switch to reporter Mary.
Breaking news. Union General Irving McDowell's army attacked Confederate soldiers in Manassas, Virginia. The battle began at 5:30 a.m. and lasted until late afternoon. McDowell's 3 divisions cornered the Confederate soldiers and set fire using cannons. They seemed to be aiming toward the stone bridge. At 10 a.m., the Union and Confederate soldiers officially began fighting. There were soldiers from Rhode Island, New York, and New Hampshire on the Union side, and soldiers from Louisiana, South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi on the Confederate side. Intel explains that the Union Army began the battle, and the Confederates had no choice but to defend themselves. Early afternoon, Confederate soldiers sadly retreated north to Henry Hill, but it seemed that the Union soldiers were following them to keep fighting. As the Union soldiers made their way to the Confederates, Confederate General Thomas Jackson and Colonel Wade Hampton's soldiers began to attack a New England regiment led by General Erasmus Keyes. But a new Confederate line formed on Henry Hill, led by General Thomas J. Jackson. Jackson and his men created somewhat of a stone wall that stopped many of the Union soldiers from advancing. The Union soldiers made their last attempts at attacking, but General Thomas Stonewall Jackson soldiers defended against them. The battle was Confederate victory. Without the power of Thomas Stonewall Jackson, the Confederates would not be where we are now. According to different sources, there are 2,896 Union casualties and only 1,982 Confederate casualties. On to the next Confederate victory.
Now, on the topic of emancipation, President Lincoln has just implemented the Emancipation Proclamation document. According to sources, Lincoln expects to free all enslaved people in states rebelling against the government. The enforcement of this inferior proclamation into an amendment will change the history of the United States. It brings no doubt that this document could change the outcome of the war as well. This proclamation will apply to the states that secede from the Union, and as a result, slavery will remain untouched in the loyal bordering states. This is not the only trick Lincoln is using, as the main part of this proclamation is to be the first step into the abolition of slavery. The Union is now stealing our utilization of slavery in our war effort. This is threatening, as we will now be held to bring less soldiers to the war front, as there will be less men to manage the home front. This proclamation is an outright attack on the Confederate States' rights, as by this proclamation we are losing the system of slavery that has helped our states and others thrive thus far. This is not a day of celebration. Instead, this is a day to remember what we, the Confederates, are fighting for in this war.
More angry news. West Virginia has separated from Virginia. Those rebels, their arguments with us lasting all the way back to the 17th century. I thought the Virginian Constitution in 1776 was supposed to solve this problem. If they wanted the land they were complaining about, they should have moved west. Those poor peasants could buy cheap land there. After our state made the noble and correct decision to secede, those bozos illegally voted to make a reformed government in June of 1861. Those pro-unionist traitors. 2 years ago in August, they even went against the Constitution and voted to illegally separate from the motherland of Virginia. They approved their Constitution in February of 1862, and that blasphemous Senator Whitman T. Wiley even submitted a bill to that horrible, oppressive Congress of that darned Union in the February of last year. They said they would emancipate slaves in their legal state as well. On July 14th in 1862, just last year, that corrupt Senate approved West Virginia's entrance to their corrupt government they call a country. In December, the House approved the bill as well, when they have no right to. That spotty Lincoln signed the bill admitting those traitorous West Virginians into the Union on December 31st and was officially recognized by that heathen as a state in the Union as of June 20th, 1863.
Good evening, Virginia. Today we bring you a controversial and unsettling development in the ongoing conflict. Amid the Civil War, the emergence of African American regiments onto the battlefield is a troubling development for those of us who support the institution of slavery here in Virginia. The Union, led by President Abraham Lincoln and his abolitionist companions, has begun enlisting African American men into their ranks, composed of freed and escaped slaves from both the North and South who threaten our society. The Union Army not only uses them for labor, but plan to train them for combat roles, placing them directly into battle against our brave Confederate soldiers. Authorized in 1862, the formation of segregation regiments, known as the United States Colored Troops, undermines the natural order, allowing those deemed inferior to take up arms against their rightful masters. These soldiers have been praised for their alleged courage on everything from the battlefields of Virginia to the coastlines of South Carolina, but their actions have only served to strengthen the confidence of those who want to disrupt the stability of our way of life with the added institution of slavery. Not only does this change in the balance of authority threaten the integrity of our institutions, but it also puts at risk and challenges the very foundations of our society. Seeing our opponents gaining strength from within our own ranks serves as a sobering reminder of the turbulent times in which we live in as we watch the lengths to which the Union will go to undermine our cause. May we see victory and the preservation of the way of life in the upcoming days.
Breaking news: the Confederates have now surrendered. The Great Civil War is now over. On April 7, 1865, the Union General Ulysses S. Grant sent a letter to the Confederate General Robert E. Lee. The letter stated, "The result of last week must convince you of the hopelessness of further resistance on the part of the Army of Northern Virginia in this struggle. I feel that it is so, and regard it as my duty to shift myself the responsibility of any further effusion of blood by asking you of the surrender of that portion of the CS Army known as the Army of Northern Virginia." The Appomattox campaign began on March 25th and now is ended on April 9th. On April 9th, during the Battle of Five Forks, the Union soldiers blocked the last supply line for the Northern Virginia Army. On April 8th, General Philip H. Sheridan and his troops blocked a train coming in to supply Lee's troops. To give an example of the horrors that many Confederate soldiers experienced during the Battle of Five Forks, the Confederacy suffered 2,950 casualties, while the Union only suffered 830. On April 9th, Union General Ulysses S. Grant met with Confederate General Robert E. Lee in Appomattox Courthouse. Lee was eager to meet after he had read Grant's letter. The two met at a local farmer's house named Wilmer McLean. They spoke about the details of the Confederacy's surrender, and they seemed to be fair. Confederate soldiers will be paroled prisoners in the Union. This has been a good fight, but the Union had turned out to be victorious.
We have received an important update on the hunt for Lincoln's killer. To recap, President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated at 10:15 p.m. over a week ago on April 14, 1865, at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. He who was attacked with a .44 caliber pistol in the middle of a showing of Our American Cousin. The assailant, John Wilkes Booth, was an actor in the area. Upon shooting Lincoln in the head, Booth jumped from Lincoln's private booth onto the stage as she shouted Virginia's great motto, Sic Semper Tyrannis, meaning thus ever to tyrants. This dramatic attack on the Union's president resulted in his death, which was declared officially 9 hours later on the 15th of April. Now, it is April 26th of 1865, and Union soldiers have found and arrested John Wilkes Booth. Booth and one of his accomplices, David Harold, had been tracked down to Richard Garrett Farm near Port Royal, Virginia. There, Union soldiers surrounded the barn and lit it on fire. Booth's accomplice, Harold, surrendered, but while Booth did not. Booth was shot in the neck because he allegedly raised his gun as if to shoot. Booth was only taken out of the farm several hours later while still alive. He was muttering, quote, useless, useless, as he died. However, Booth was not solely responsible for the murder of the Union president. He had at least 4 accomplices, one of whom, Mary Surratt, is a woman. The 4 accomplices were convicted and will be hung on July 7th of 1865. Mary Surratt will be the first woman to be put on death by a federal punishment. This has been a momentous day for Virginia, and we will do our best to keep you informed as we gain more information.